Dungeons and Dragons is cool, but is it cooler than eels and escalators?
Escalators, escalators, escalators!
Eels.
What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Saw this movie with Sean Chandler in the Flick Pick. We had no clue about anything that has to do with Dungeons and Dragons, so if you have played the game before, let me know your thoughts. I am curious to see how this works for you. Let's do it. So a charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. This movie is directed by John Francis Daley, Jonathan Goldstein, writers from films like Horrible Bosses, Spider-Man Homecoming, directors and writers of the movie Game Night, which is honestly one of the most underrated sequels. Well, maybe not critically, but in terms of people seeing it, go see Game Night. I truly believe it was hilarious.
Oh my god, that was so funny!
So my question was, how are you going to take that comedic magic from a movie like Game Night and translate that into this crazy fantasy world, these characters that so many people know and love, the lore, which, again, I'm not familiar with, but I believe from watching this, they tried their very best to integrate as much of that as possible. So these are people that clearly love Dungeons and Dragons, but they also have great comedic sensibility, so that should make for a good movie, right? And like I said, going in, I'm like, I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons. I go into a superhero movie, I know all about superheroes, so at least I have something to base that off of, but I
don't know.
But I have friends that know. They were really excited. I like the cast. I think Chris Pine, he has that charisma built in. Michelle Rodriguez, she can handle the action sequences. And is it going to be a ragtag group of heroes that come together and go on a quest? Okay, we've seen that before. How do you switch up the formula? How do you do something different? Here's what I'll say. Dungeons and Dragons does not do anything that we haven't seen before. The beautiful thing about it, though, is it is so self-aware of the fact that it is taking us on an adventure that we've seen before. And when they come together and they build this friendship, it's all about friendship. How sweet. But you buy it. You buy the camaraderie. You buy the fact that they know the type of movie that they are in, talking about these actors, but then the characters, they are somewhat compelling, and they actually had arcs that I cared about. Now, they try to implement some emotion in this movie. And there are scenes where, somebody's crying. It's like, oh my God. That can get silly, a little cliche, but again, you care about them. So there is part of you that's thinking, this line, we've seen this line 1,000 times, but I do like what they're doing with this character, so obviously I am going to care. But then you have other lines, and when the line is delivered, it is delivered as a one-liner, but it's delivered as a one-liner that is so understanding of the type of movie that it's in, and there are so many jokes that work extremely well in this movie because it's written in a way that serves the story, serves the character, but understands you can't take this too seriously, but it doesn't overdo it. There was a movie last year that tried its best to be comedic at every turn, and people got tired of that. I didn't even hate the movie. It's not a good one. But from the trailer, I thought for sure Dungeons and Dragons would go down that route, and I would walk out going, yeah, it was fine. But this is a lesson to me. Austin, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge this movie based off of what you have seen more recently in the blockbuster world, because this is written in a way that serves so many elements so well. Not only that, right? Not only do you have a script that occasionally overdoes it, but again, other moments are just so impactful. Characters that you're following along, and you're just happy Justice Smith as Simon wasn't as annoying as you thought he would be at first. You understand why Reggie Jean Page was cast as the character that he plays, and that is a brilliant brilliant character. I loved his presence, and the back and forth between he and Chris Pine is incredible. Sophia Lillis is great. Hugh Grant chewing up the scenery and the screen time. He was having an absolute blast. There is a moment in the movie, a lengthy moment, where you just go without seeing him for like 25 minutes. And I liked him so much, I'm like, why are we not going back to him every 10 minutes? From a pacing standpoint, I get it. I understand why you did that. The movie's 2 hours and 15 minutes. You can't continue to cut like that. You want to spend some time on one side of the story. So actually, that decision probably helped the movie. But I can't help having that criticism because Hugh Grant was just so good. Michelle Rodriguez as Holga. I like this character, and I think the physicality of the character was great. Now, there are times where she has to bring about some emotion that maybe the delivery just isn't quite there. I understand the character that she's playing, so it doesn't overly require her to be extremely emotional, but at the same time, I'm like, I wish I was more compelled by that sequence. That being said, the physicality aspect, what she does best, is really, really good. And then there's the MVP. Chris Pine is amazing in this. I genuinely mean that. He's fantastic. You knew he could lead a franchise with Star Trek. We've seen him give Oscar-worthy performances in Hell or High Water, but this is some of the most compelling stuff I've ever seen from him because it's like he really wanted to be there. It's not just, oh, we're Dungeons and Dragons and we're doing they're in a dungeon and they're on a dragon. No, this guy saw this script and said, I am going to have the best time filming this movie, and that translates. And I think this character is one of my favorite leading characters in a franchise that I've seen in quite some time. I could watch him all day.
I could do this all day.
But then you have all of the things that makes Dungeons and Dragons what it is, right? The characters, the character design, the integration of practical effects. There are actually people in costumes all throughout this movie. It's not all CGI, and you're going to have CGI. There's one moment where a deer is sliding under a gate, and I'm like, that looked terrible. But it's so few and far in between that it looks terrible, and they're actually filming on location in certain sequences. So this is far removed from Lord of the Rings in terms of the vibe and tone that it has, but some of those sweeping, more epic shots kind of reminded me of Lord of the Rings, and that's really cool. And then those huge CGI creatures, again, for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, they look great, and when they are engaging in battle with our main characters, I was actually convinced. And watching this movie is one thing, but this movie making me want to look into Dungeons and Dragons, and if that's as fun as this, well, it could have opened up my world. And that's really all you can ask as an outsider to a movie like this. If it kind of makes me want to go and look into all of this stuff, that's really cool, man. Main flaws. I mentioned a few things. I will say sometimes that silliness that works, it becomes overly silly. And there were a few moments in the movie, maybe more than a few, where I kind of cringed, like, they're going for something here and it's not necessarily working.
But come on, man.
And then, like I said, when things get emotional and our characters are trying to convey that to each other, and it's just the same dialogue that you've heard 1,000 times before, but being delivered by a different character. You like the character that's delivering it, but we've heard it over and over and over. Before I give you my score, I'll just say this. I think the theater I was in loved it. I watched it with critics and non-critics. Everyone was having a great time. Everyone I went with was having a great time. And it's one of those movies that you watch, and yes, it is a bit lengthy at 2 hours and 15 minutes, but I did indeed feel like I was just kind of escaping reality and going into this fantasy land with these wacky characters. And again, movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, they set that precedent, but I like how this took that in a bit of a different direction, made it work in a way that's just as entertaining. The D&D movie has almost everything you look for in a blockbuster. Beyond the solid action and fun characters, it is so self-aware. The movie fully embraces the silly adventure at the center and runs with it. Pine's charisma is unmatched, and certain jokes are brilliant for a film that I just had little anticipation for. I think the movie in the early 2000s wasn't the best, but this, I think, is, at this point, the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Before I go, if you live in Florida or anywhere near Florida and you want to say hi to me this weekend, show up, say hi. I'm going to be there with the Flick Pick, 3C Films, Sean, Cody, all those guys. So you see it on the picture. Thanks for watching.